In the early 2000s, gaming was about more than just pressing buttons. It was about making a statement. The PlayStation 2 at the time had a library stacked with games that pushed boundaries, but in my opinion, none of them did it quite like this one. Imagine a world where rap legends stepped out of the booth and actually into the wrestling ring, where hip-hop culture collided with bone-crushing wrestling moves. And at the time, back in 2003, that world actually existed, and it was called Jam Vendetta. But Jam Vendetta wasn't just a game, it was a cultural phenomenon. Today we're diving deep into its story, and we're going to discover how did a game about rap battles turn into a brutal wrestling showdown, and what made it so legendary, and why even 2 decades later is it still talked about in the halls of video gaming history. This is the story of Jam Vendetta, a fighting game like no other. Now the story of Jam Vendetta begins in a kind of unexpected place, the offices of EA Canada. It was in the early 2000s, and EA Sports Big, if you remember that series, was riding high on the success of SSX and NBA Street. So they had a knack of taking traditional genres and injecting them with over-the-top flair. But wrestling? For them, this was kind of uncharted territory. Now, initially, the idea of Jam Vendetta wasn't even tied to hip-hop. The project started as a straightforward wrestling game. Aki Corporation, which is a Japanese developer known for creating the beloved WWF No Mercy, were brought on board. Aki's expertise in creating intricate wrestling mechanics gave the project a solid foundation. Wrestling fans were already familiar with their work, and, to be honest, expectations were high. However, EA wanted more than just a wrestling game. They wanted to create something that would stand out in the crowded market. Now, at around that same time, Def Jam Records was looking for new ways to expand its brand into other entertainment mediums, and the stars aligned when EA and Def Jam joined forces. The concept of blending wrestling with hip-hop culture was born, and it was unlike anything the industry had ever seen before. Now, this just wasn't about licensing music or featuring a few cameos. EA and Def Jam wanted to build something that felt authentic to the culture. They brought in real-life hip-hop legends like DMX, Meth, Redman, Luda, and so forth. Not just as playable characters, but actual integral parts of the game's identity. Each artist had their own unique fighting style, authentic voice lines, finishing moves, and that all ensured that their presence was more than just skin deep. The partnership with Def Jam also allowed the game to have a killer soundtrack. Now, as far as the music in this game, like I said, obviously I can't do it because of copyrights. I'd be skewered on this video with copyright strikes. But the music, what made it so great was at the time, they did have a few games that would, put actual real music. I mean, that wasn't the first time to ever do that in a video game. What made Def Jam so cool was they had some classics in there, from hip hop tracks, classics. And it was a time where, I'm not going to go too far into it, but back then hip hop was still hip hop, in my opinion, early 2000s, late 90s or whatever. So they had a lot of tracks from that era. And then what also made it cool was they had to, when you played the game, you'd have the instrumental version of it. So you definitely, in some ways, you were getting like 2 tracks. And if you could make a CD of this game, because yeah, CD burners were actually a thing back then, not so much tapes. But hey, if you had a tape player, if you couldn't upgrade to a CD in your car, tape player was still cool. And you could make just the soundtrack alone on that game, definitely some bangers. So yeah, that was a cool thing. Now, the games I say might have done that as well. So maybe like the GTA series at the time, GTA 3 had a lot of, GTA 3 had kind of offshoot music, but Vice City is when they got into actual 80s tracks, if you were a fan of the 80s. And not like today where 80s are considered super old. Back then, 80s were still old, but they weren't too old. So you figure a decade and some change between a generation. But now you hear something, what trips me out is on the oldie station, they play 80s rock. That's considered the oldies now. Ugh. Anyway, the music, in my opinion, it just wasn't a background element. It was actually part of the game's DNA. And the team at EA Canada worked hard to create environments that captured the gritty, urban aesthetic of underground fight clubs. From dimly lit warehouses to bustling nightclubs, arenas felt alive, and each bringing their own flair and atmosphere and personality. The collaboration between EA, Aki Corporation, and Def Jam Records, it was very ambitious for the time. It required the blending of 3 different worlds: professional wrestling, video game development, and hip-hop culture. Yet against all odds, the pieces came together and created something truly groundbreaking. And with the groundwork laid, Def Jam Vendetta was ready to take the gaming world by storm, but no one could have predicted just how big of an impact it would have. Now at its core, Def Jam Vendetta was a wrestling game, but it didn't play like your average WWE title. The moves were flashier, the hits felt heavier, and the finishers, in my opinion, absolutely jaw-dropping. Every character had their own fighting style, from high-flying acrobats to brute force brawling. But underneath the hood, the game's combat mechanics are where the game truly shined. Players had a variety of moves at their disposal, from basic punches and kicks to grapples that could transition into devastating slams. And timing and strategy were key. Now, button mashing might get you through the early fights, but as you progress through the game, the opponents were tougher and actually required a little bit of skill and precision. And they also included a momentum system that added another layer of depth. As you fought, landing successful hits and taunts, you would build up your momentum meter. If you filled it up, you had the potential to unleash a character's signature blazing move. These finishers weren't just powerful, they were actually a spectacle. The screen would darken, the music would intensify, and your character would deliver an over-the-top brutal move that left your opponent sprawled out on the mat. Or in some cases, the concrete. And to add on to that, I'd say when somebody's in blazing move, you got this infamous scene here where most players would just run from the person. I know I did it all the time. Get outside the ring and just hightail it out there until their blazing meter wore off. And I'm sure a lot of people did that. Now, honestly, guilty as charged. I was definitely guilty of using that strategy, but it made sense because you actually had that small window. If your if their meter came up and they were going to do their finisher, I mean, if you had a chance to get out of dodge, the best thing was to get out the ropes and run around. And my buddies actually got mad at me. They called me cheap and, that's messed up. You're going to just run. Yeah, I'm trying to win the match. So yeah, and what's cool about that was if you took it outside, you can actually bring the match back because it didn't take a lot to get your moves in. It did, because this game was kind of momentum based in some ways. And once you got your opponent down and got on a roll, you could actually do some pretty good moves. Like one of the best strategies to me was submission moves. It actually bring up your meter a lot. And then you had that window when the person was on the ground to, do your taunt and get your blaze meter up. So yeah, I definitely use that. And if you did it as well, don't feel bad. It's part of the game. I don't care what kind of names your friends call you, because they had some choice words for me. But hey, competition back in the day did that. Now each fighter in the game, whether they were a rap legend or just an original character made for the game, had unique movesets and animations that made them feel distinct. Meth, for example, fought with raw power and street brawling techniques, while Luda relied on quick strikes and agility. So that gave you the fun of choosing the right fighter for your playstyle, and that was a huge part of the fun. But what made the gameplay truly stand out was how it blended the worlds of professional wrestling and street fighting. It was a perfect hybrid. The grappling system was, in my opinion, intuitive and kind of deep, with light and strong grapples that could lead to devastating slams or chain combos. And this gave the player a sense of control over the action, rewarding strategic thinking and quick reflexes. Not to mention, it even had reversals to add a whole nother level of depth to strategy. And then we gotta talk about the backgrounds. Each arena brought its own flavor to the gameplay, whether you were brawling it out in a crowded nightclub, a gritty warehouse. The roaring crowds and dynamic lighting made every match feel like a spectacle. In addition to all that, we gotta talk about the multiplayer. Now multiplayer, that was where the game truly came alive. Going head to head with friends brought out competitive spirit, as players and friends battled to see who had the most skills. Whether it was pulling off a last second blazing move or taunting your opponent mid-match, just trolling, the multiplayer was awesome. And I gotta give hats off to him for even going further than that with giving it a story mode. The story mode also kept players engaged with its progression system. Winning matches would earn you money, which could be used to upgrade your character stats. And let's not forget about the honeys you could unlock. Not to mention all their pictures, which I think they did very nicely. So this added a layer of actual RPG-like customization, giving players the freedom to develop their fighter to suit their preferred style. If you wanted a guy that was super strong, a guy that could break all the grapples, a guy that had a lot of speed, or just somebody that had a lot of charisma, you could build your character the way you wanted. And to top it all off, there was unlockable content, a feature that gave this game incredible replay value. From new characters to additional arenas and costumes, Def Jam Vendetta rewarded those players who dug deep. Some of the most powerful fighters, including iconic rappers, could only be unlocked by completing specific challenges or progressing through the story mode. And unlockables just weren't about bragging rights, they kept players coming back for more. Each reward felt like an accomplishment, whether it be discovering a new move or earning enough cash to buy upgrades. The thrill of unlocking content gave the game a sense of progression that extended beyond a single playthrough, so you'd have to play it again if you wanted to unlock everything. For completionists, Jam Vendetta was a treasure trove. The combination of unlockable content and competitive multiplayer ensured that no two gamers felt the same. Whether you were battling for dominance in the versus mode, against a buddy, or grinding through the story to unlock every secret, there was always something to strive for. Now, this was huge. At the time, it was kind of the norm, and I feel bad for gaming today. If you're playing a lot of games, don't get me wrong, gaming's still all right today. I still love playing some new games. I actually played quite a few of them, but at the same time, this game gave you so much stuff to unlock. And it wasn't just Def Jam. Games just of that era gave you tons of unlockables. The stuff that Def Jam gave us was the new costumes, the female fighters, the rap stars you can unlock, and all the other stuff. It was just, those things by today's standards would be definitely DLC packs, and you'd have to pay for transactions and everything, and they wouldn't give you nowhere near what they gave you back then. So that was very cool. It gave it a lot of replay value. A lot of the finishers that the new characters would get would be the same, but hey, you still can unlock them. You can unlock the pictures of the honeys. I mean, you could do a lot of stuff in this game, and they just don't do that anymore. They don't make them like that anymore. If they do, you got to pay $70 for the game, and then another $20 or $30 for DLC. And then not only would you get all the stuff, they probably break it up into segments. So yeah, that was a big deal back then, trying to unlock all the stuff. So being a completionist back then actually did reward you like it should. Not like today where you got to pay a crap ton of money for very little. So yeah, shout outs to Def Jam for having that. And while you were having a blast playing the game was also a powerful tool for advertising potential. The clothing and the branding in Def Jam Vendetta mirrored real hip-hop style fashion trends, featuring oversized jerseys, chains, and urban streetwear that were iconic in the early 2000s. Players could see their favorite rappers sporting recognizable brands and styles, seamlessly blending the worlds of fashion and gaming. Shout out to Fat Farm. And let's not forget about the music. Like I said earlier, I cannot put these tracks on here but trust me, there are so many bangers on there. The soundtrack of Def Jam Vendetta was stacked with tracks from the label's biggest stars. By including these songs, the game doubled as a promotional platform for Def Jam's music catalog, and players were exposed to a curated mix of hits and underground bangers. And this helped reinforce the connection between gaming and the music industries. And the advertising potential wasn't just about in-game sales of merchandise, it was about building a brand. Def Jam Vendetta didn't just sell copies, it reinforced Def Jam recordings as a cultural powerhouse. And it helped with bridging the gap between entertainment mediums in a way that felt seamless, but yet organic. So ultimately, Def Jam wasn't about just fighting, it was about style. From the characters' animations to the soundtrack, every element of the gameplay reinforced the game's hip-hop identity. In my opinion, I felt like it was authentic. It wasn't just a wrestling game, it was an experience that oozed personality and tons of swag. But what kind of impact did Def Jam have? When Def Jam hit the shelves in 2003, it made waves. Now I remember myself back in the day, at that time, 2003, my late 20s, I was blown away by this game. And critics praised its unique concept and polished gameplay, while fans just couldn't get enough of seeing their favorite rappers throwing down on the screen. It wasn't just a game, it was a celebration of hip-hop culture at its peak. Also, another strong fact I think was about the representation. Now back in the day, at a time when hip-hop was often misunderstood or even dismissed by mainstream media, Def Jam Vendetta proudly put everything they had up front and center. It showcased the power, the creativity, and the raw energy of the hip-hop culture back in the early 2000s. Not like today when hip-hop's kind of, well, don't get me started on that. For many players though, it wasn't just a game, it was a validation of hip-hop culture. It showed that hip-hop wasn't just music, it was a lifestyle, an art form, and a force to be reckoned with. And from the soundtracks to the character designs, every aspect of the game was steeped in the culture, creating an authentic experience that resonated with a lot of fans. And it brought in a lot of new fans. I think with the representation of the characters they had on the game, no matter who you were, like hip-hop or not, there was a good chance you were going to like the game. And lastly, we'll talk about the legacy. Def Jam Vendetta wasn't just a one-hit wonder. It paved the way for its sequel, Def Jam Fight for New York, which took everything great about the original and cranked it up, in my opinion, to 11. But even as the series evolved, the original game still held a special place in fans' hearts, just as it does today. The sequel expanded on everything: more characters, more moves, a deeper storyline, and it was a critical and commercial success. And that cemented the series as one of the most unique franchises in gaming history. But the legacy of Def Jam Vendetta even goes beyond the games themselves. The series became a touchstone for how music and gaming could intersect in innovative ways. It showed a huge crossover, along with the gaming industry that incorporating authentic cultural elements wasn't just a gimmick, it could actually resonate with players on a whole nother level. So over the years, fans have asked for a revival of the series. Social media campaigns and petitions frequently call on EA and Def Jam to bring it back. Now, I don't know, they did kind of bring it back with the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. I don't know if we're going to talk about that version of Def Jam. To me, that wasn't Def Jam, but you know, that's a video for another time. So today, Def Jam Vendetta stands as a testament to a creative, risk-taking venue. It reminds us of a time when gaming was unafraid to be bold, unafraid to embrace culture, and unafraid to have fun. And its influence can be felt not just in the games, but in the broader conversation of how interactive media can reflect the world around us. So if you've never played Def Jam Vendetta, I highly recommend you playing Def Jam Vendetta and Fight for New York. The third one, which I don't even think belongs in the Def Jam family, you can play the one at your own risk. But the first two, definitely, I highly recommend them. So what I think about Def Jam, this is one of the few times where there's a game where you really can't say nothing bad about it. Not that I'd want to, but there's really nothing bad to say about this game. I feel like it did everything right. It came at a time where online was kind of just getting its footing, but it wasn't really there yet. So a lot of games you still play with your homies back in the day. And this one was so cool because it did everything right. It captured, in my opinion, the urban style of gaming. And I'm still amazed to this day. I mean, it still aged super well. If you play this one today, it's still, the mechanics are still good, still modern in a wrestling game. And it kind of did it just right with that hybrid of brawling, also putting wrestling in there as well. And then it had the licensing. And I think that's what really hurts. People always say, why don't we get another Def Jam? Just because of the licensing back in the day. But back then, what made this one bold was, and this one and Fight for New York, Def Jam 3, I'll talk about that in a second. But what made it cool was they were bold. Collaborations wanted to work together, and corporations, while they were greedy, corporations are always greedy. Not like today where it's just like, you know, over the top. So to make a game like Def Jam today with licensing, I can't even imagine what that would cost. But back then, if you were around back in the PS2 era, consider yourself lucky just to be able to get games like this where the licensing and just, you know, corporate greed didn't destroy ideas and they never came to life. But as far as the game, just the music in this game, guys, if you're a fan of, early 2000s hip hop, you know, it was definitely a great time to play. And then the style of the clothes. I mean, yeah, it was Fat Farm back in the day. I remember having a few, I had the Fat Farm hats, the shirts, and you know, you had the baggy jeans and all stuff, if that was your style back in the day. But even if it wasn't, it was still cool because they had a character for you as well that might kind of dressed maybe not as urban as other characters. So it was a free for all for everything. And they put all types of variations of characters in the game. I mean, if you have the big country guy with the suspenders and the overalls. So they put something for everybody in that game, a character they might like or relate to. Or even if you didn't, hell, it was just a fun time to pick a character that's offshoot to you. So I feel like they just did everything right and captured the essence of what a wrestling fighting game should be. It had tag team, it had the finishers, they had style, then they had the actual voice actors of the actual hip hop artists in there. I mean, they did everything right. And lastly, I'll talk briefly about Def Jam 3. I don't even consider that in the Def Jam family. They made the game, but it sucked. And I don't know how they went from, you know, the great Vendetta into New York and then, you know, Icons. It was just, yeah, that game will probably be only good. It looked amazing. It was terrible, a concept where you scratched the record and you had the explosion and you could do, I don't know. They dropped the ball there and they never made anything else since. So, but you can still find these out in the wild, Def Jam, if you're a PS2 collector, because they made so many of them. But yeah, if you've never played this, and I think what's the name, Kinnikuman Man Wrestling, that's another wrestling game in Japan based off Muscles. I think they run on the same engine. But if you have never played Def Jam Vendetta and you can get your hands on this one, or even emulate it, definitely give this one a try. It will make you rethink urban street wrestling. They did it right. It was like lightning in a bottle at the time. I mean, very few games, in my opinion, captured that wrestling feel, but brought over urban hip hop style in a way to make it such like this is basically, in my opinion, a masterpiece and a masterclass of a wrestling game that's fun and anybody can pick up and play. So that's gonna do it for Def Jam Vendetta, guys. As always, let me know in the comments your experience with it. I'm sure you have plenty, because Def Jam was just cool. I mean, it was a game for everybody. Don't get fooled by it. It was a game, anybody could play it. That's gonna do it for this one. As always, take care of yourself, protect your inner peace. God bless you. Catch you next video. Thanks for watching.